Okay, guys, so I'm going to get started. Again, I'll just introduce myself because I know we have a few more people after joining. My name is Anna White. I'm the occupational therapist here at the Lighthouse Arabia. It's lovely to meet you all virtually. I know that some of you were expecting Dr. Catherine today, but unfortunately she cannot be here, so I'm stepping in for her. Can I check with you guys before we get started that you can hear me and see me okay? If someone could raise their hand maybe, or write in the Q&A or the chat box, just to let me know. Okay, thank you. Lots of you have raised your hands. Thank you so much. Hopefully we will not have any difficulties today with our Zoom session and no interruptions. And thank you so much for those of you who can see me and it's clear. Thank you. Okay, so as I said, my name is Anna. I'm an occupational therapist here at the Lighthouse. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Just to give you a bit of a background on me, I work mainly with children, but I do work with some teens and young adults as well. For those of you who don't know what occupational therapy is, I'm not going to go into it too much today, but basically I really support kids be more independent in their occupations, whatever that might be, from schoolwork to behaviors, to handwriting, to motor skills, delayed developmental milestones, all of those different things. I work very closely with the psychologists, psychiatrists and speech therapists here in the Lighthouse Arabia, but it's a pleasure to be with you. I do a lot of our mental health community sessions like this, and I also do a lot of our mental health first aid, which we'll get into, I'll explain in a little bit. So just some housekeeping before we start. Please feel free to write any questions in the chat or the Q&A box throughout the webinar. Unfortunately, I will not be able to see those questions until the very end, but I will get to them at the end. If you write a question and I get to it, please delete it so I can get to the others. Hopefully I will have time to answer them all, but if I don't, you guys can reach out to me. You can contact us on the website, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We're on different platforms. Okay, so we'll get started. I see lots more of you have joined. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you of the PowerPoint. So you will see that you can move me around. So please feel free to move my face wherever it suits you. And we will get started then. Hopefully you can all see the screen. And we'll get started. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about keep cool and do school. Now, we are almost, well, I say almost, we're approaching a year of these uncertain times. And I think, you know, many people think, and a lot of the parents that I work with, they feel like they're constantly adapting. And that is what we're doing, because there is change. It's not that we have built up the emotional resiliency to just change very fast. As things happen, we keep having to adapt. And that is what we're having to do after the summer holidays as we're all back to school. So for some of you, you might be doing full-time back to school. Some of you might be doing full-time home learning, and others might be doing that blended approach. But whatever it is, of course, it will add a new dynamic to that parent-child relationship. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. We have lots of these different webinars. Today, we're just going to be talking about this topic because parenting is such a broad topic. I won't get to answer other questions or maybe other queries, but we have lots of other webinars such as building emotional resilience in your kids, caring for their mental health, etc., and lots of ones for adults and working parents as well. So please have a look at those if there's other areas and if you enjoy today. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'd like to introduce the Lighthouse Arabia. So we are a mental health and wellness clinic. We're based in Sakim in Dubai, in the very middle. We are well known for our psychology services and psychiatry, but we also have occupational therapy, that's me, and speech and language therapy. So along with doing a lot of one-on-one based therapy across all ages, we also do a lot of group work. We do a lot of trainings. Right now, most of them are online. In fact, they're all online right now. But we are continuing to provide that service. If any of you are interested in our support groups, they're all free of charge. And we have a support group for you name it. We have almost everything. I run a motherhood support group. I also run one that we're starting back soon for parents of children with ADHD. But we've lots of different ones: job loss, surviving COVID, healthcare workers, a lot of different things. And we're also the only accredited provider of MHFA, which is mental health first aid. Some of you may be mental health first aiders, you might be already trained, but if it's something that you're interested in, we're also moving them, and we have moved them onto online platforms. So we have an adult to adult mental health first aid, we have an adult to adolescent, and we have a teen to teen. And the teen to teen one is the one that I really have a big role in. I really, really enjoy doing this. I've gone into a lot of schools to do it. And we also do it, we're working on creating a program for that online as well. So that's us mainly. I won't go into too much detail. There's over 30 clinicians here right now, all different specialties and backgrounds, but we work quite closely together. I have to say I miss my team being online a lot now. I'm really looking forward to catching up with them, but we have different kind of specialties and areas. So if ever you're interested, even after today, whether it's for yourself, a colleague, a friend, your child, and if you want to have a look on our website and browse through those different categories and specialties, please feel free. So our learning objectives, I really want to get stuck into this, and hopefully we will get it done in around 45 minutes. And then I'm going to leave you guys some time to ask me questions. So first, I want to talk about checking in with yourself and your own expectations. And if I can ask you guys to walk away with anything today, it's that first point, because as you will see, we always kind of tend to fix the kids, to work on them, to fix the behaviors, to want to change something that they're doing. But what I'm going to tell you is that I will always bring you back to the point that it starts at home with the caregivers, with the parents, because I want you to see yourself as almost like a thermostat. You are the family thermostat. So if you're feeling a little bit too high, or you're racing, or you're not regulated, the whole house is going to be in that way. So it always comes back to you. And if that's really something I want you to walk away with, checking in with yourself. How are you feeling, which we'll get to on the next slide. Then I want to talk about creating a positive learning environment. And here I'm going to talk about on-task strategies for that home learning or homework, and also how you can create a healthy, consistent routine at home, because we know that kids really thrive on routine. Then we're going to be talking about finding opportunity and adversity. Now, some of you I know may be sitting thinking, I just want to get through this. You know, I don't want to grow from this. I just want to get through it. But really, when we go through uncertain times, when we go through challenges, you name it, it doesn't have to be just this current pandemic. It can be any glitch or any difficulty that your family might go through, whether it's the loss of a loved one, losing job, moving countries, moving schools. These opportunities are, these things are opportunities that we can use to build resiliency in our kids. And what I mean by, and ourselves, of course, what I mean by resiliency, being emotional resilient, is that we have the coping mechanisms to bounce back after these things and continue on with our life. We're in touch with our feelings. We know how to regulate, and we know how to come back in a healthy way. And that's really something that I want to get into today as well. Because many of you might feel that your kids are really after becoming problem solvers after the last few months. But really it is a time to grow those skills, and they can then generalize that skills into future things that may happen in their life. All right. So let's get back to the first thing that I said, that I'm not going to let you walk away with today without really getting a grasp of. And that's checking in with yourself. So even right now, I want you to have a think. I want you to think, how are you coping right now? How do you feel about everything that's going on right now? Do you feel that you have adjusted? Do you feel that you have adapted? Or maybe do you feel that you haven't, that you're still working on that? What kind of feelings are you experiencing? Are you grieving the loss of your old lifestyle? Do you feel that you're doing a good job as a parent? But asking yourself those questions are really important, because often we tend to kind of push them aside and we think this is just going to go away by itself, but it won't go away, because if we don't really regulate and learn to be in touch with our own feelings, they're probably just going to get more intense and grow. So we need to work on those. We need to identify those. Parenting is an inside job. This is the message. And there's a very good book that I want to recommend to you all today. And that is called, I always recommend it to my clients and parents that I work with. And that is called Parenting from the Inside Out. And it's by Dan Siegel. And this book is really, really amazing because it kind of puts parents back in touch with their own views on things, their own parenting, where they got their parenting styles from, and really how they're regulating. But it's a really fantastic book to start the process off and to get that thinking pattern going. But always remember that you are their biggest educator. So I have a lot of parents coming to me lately and saying, I can't do it. We're not doing this home learning. I'm not meeting the deadlines. I feel guilty for doing things by myself, etc. But the thing is, you have to remember, and whenever you feel yourself feeling like that, you have to remember that you are doing your best, and all you can do is your best. There's no parent guidebook, unfortunately, to get through the next few months in the next school year. A lot of us are learning it by trial and error and by making mistakes, and that's okay. And there's days that you might feel like you have very productive days, and there's equally days that you might feel like you're struggling just to get number one done on that checklist. But remember that you are the biggest educator, and that's really, really all you can do. And sometimes we really do have to lift that guilt. And think about opening yourself up to whatever emotions that you're feeling. So, you know, I know sometimes when we hear the words like sadness, grief, anger, resentment, sometimes we might feel that, you know, they're dirty words and we shouldn't feel that way. But really, anything that we're feeling right now is normal. And anything that your child is feeling right now is also normal. Of course, how we act upon those feelings is something that we might have to learn and adjust. But feeling any of those things is okay. And sometimes just admitting and labeling the feeling is the first step in that. I want you guys to really think about these two things on the slide, self-compassion and self-regulation. And there's something that we really need to learn how to do. So self-compassion, we need to learn how to motivate ourselves, how to self-soothe ourselves, and how to recognize when we are feeling overwhelmed with the situation. And that's really, really, really important. I need you to think of, you know, how do you think your inner voice talks to yourself? So do you have an inner critic that is constantly criticizing you or telling you that you're not doing something right or comparing yourself to another parent? You need to control that voice, because that voice will tell you a story and you will start to believe that story. And whenever you find yourself slipping down one of these side paths, remind yourself how you would talk to a friend. So if a family member or a best friend came to you and said, look, I'm feeling this way, ABC, I'm really feeling guilty about not spending time with the kids. I feel like they're so behind academically, whatever it is. How would you give them advice? And I want you to give yourself that same advice, because often we're very harsh and critical when it comes to ourselves, but when it's other people, we speak with more of a softer and self-soothing tone. So be mindful of that. The second thing there is self-regulation. How do you self-regulate? And this is a big one, because the behaviors that we might be seeing with kids at the moment, whether it's anger, whether it's tantrums, whether it's refusal to do things, whether it's sadness, they need to learn how to regulate themselves. They need to know what are their triggers. They need to know how to label those triggers and how to use strategies to work on those different things. And that is really, really important. And I always ask the parent. So when a child gets referred to me, maybe let's say for anger management or difficult behaviors, I will ask the parents one simple question to start. I'll say, are you able to self-regulate? What does your household look like when you have an argument, or when you have a work call, or have, you know, a heated discussion with someone? Because often our kids only hear bits of stories. So they hear fragmented information, and they put all of those bits together to create their own story, which might not actually make any sense and might not have the result. So have you ever felt yourself that when you're having an argument or maybe a heated conversation at home, that you realize the kids are there and you stop, but what happens is the kids actually don't know how you problem solve. Did you say sorry? Did you apologize? How did you fix the problem? So these emotions are okay to have at home, but kids also need to watch how parents deal with these things, how they reflect on their mistakes, how they would do things differently. And remember that your child's self-regulation and those executive functioning skills are located in the frontal lobe. And we as adults have frontal lobes and are able, we might struggle sometimes, but we are able to problem solve and think ahead, look at the bigger picture, control our impulses, that kind of thing. But kids are still developing that frontal lobe until they are the age of 25. So hold on, guys, you have a long way to go. But you really have to think about it like that. So I always say to parents, remember that they will have to borrow your frontal lobe, that you will have to teach them how to self-regulate because they don't know. And those impulses are not planned for them like we have, because we have got those through experience. So be mindful of how you're regulating at home and how you can work on yourself first. I always use the airplane rule here. When you're on an airplane, they always tell you to put on your own oxygen mask first. Well, the same applies here. You need to help yourself first before you're going to be able to help your child. So self-care, there's those two things, self-compassion and self-regulation, are a part of self-care. Now, the list on this slide might seem very obvious to many of you. You might feel, you know, these are very basic things, but do you actually do them? Because a lot of us, including myself, I need to remind myself sometimes. I actually need to sit down and review these things, because often we bypass these things. We kind of presume, we take them for granted. We say, you know, it's fine. I'll get there. I'll get sleep next week. But it doesn't work like that. These are our basic needs. And if these are not in check and in line, we cannot expect ourselves to fully be there to support our kids. And I have a lot of parents who tell me, and if you are one of these parents, I wish I could see your faces, but I usually get a few smiles with this, that I'm always told by parents, I don't have time for self-care. Are you crazy? I don't have time. I don't have time for that. But the thing is, you need to prioritize your own self-care at the top of your to-do list, because nothing else below it is really, really going to fit and go in sync if you don't look after yourself first. So make time, whether it's you get up a little bit early, whether it's you sitting in bed, listening to a podcast, escaping to the bathroom to listen to a song, or to just call someone, or whatever it is that you have to do for self-care. But this list is really, really important. Healthy diet, physical activity. Now, as an occupational therapist, physical activity is a big one for me. I'm always behind it, because when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling excess emotions in anything, physical activity will help you, because moving counteracts fear. So there's so many studies out there that show that the prescription of exercise can be actually as good or the equivalent of medication in treating some mental health difficulties. And so be very conscious of your physical health. I know I got a Fitbit during lockdown at the start, or during time at home, I should say. And it really has helped me to keep an eye on my own activity levels, because sometimes we just, you know, when you're in a mood and you really don't know why, and you're feeling maybe a bit stressed or a bit agitated, I will always bring people back to movement, whether it's kids or adults. It's so, so important. Sleep, of course, is going to set us up right for the day and the week. Staying connected, rest and play. You know, we really need to value being connected with people and reaching out to people. I know we might not be meeting people the same as we used to, but having those Zoom sessions with family, organizing a big get together on Zoom, or calling a friend, a colleague, are really things that will keep you grounded and feel connected. And that again goes to your kids as well if they're learning from home. Don't dismiss the importance of having them have their phone calls or their Zoom sessions or video calls with friends and family, because they need that to feel grounded, secured, and of course connected. So when it comes to self-regulation, these are some research strategies that really work in training yourself how to regulate: meditation, journal writing, downtime, solitude, and yoga. Now, I know maybe some of you might think, tried it, doesn't work for me. I definitely went at the very beginning, before I used to meditate, I would have said that. But you need to remember that working on your mental health is not something that's easy. And it's not something that you might enjoy initially. It's something that needs time and energy and practice, just like your physical health. So if you think about going to the gym or you want to get physically fit, you're probably not going to walk into the gym and love your first gym class or your first personal training session or whatever it is, because it's something that you need to get consistent in. You need to build a routine around it. So for these things on the list, if you feel like they're not for you or that you've tried them and they don't work, break it down into very small, manageable parts. It might be 20 seconds of meditation a day to start with. It could be one yoga pose. It could be reading about these things. If you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out to us or different resources that you can use to learn how to get started in these things, because sometimes we want to do them, but we actually don't know how to start that process. And solitude is something, I won't go through the whole list, but solitude is something that is really, really important. And again, we tend to bypass this one. A lot of us think that when we're spending time alone, we either feel guilty because we should be with the kids, or we feel bored, or we feel that we're lonely. But the thing is, sometimes we need quiet space. We need a quiet time away from everything to reflect and to get in touch with our emotions or feelings or reflections or future plans or whatever it is that you feel that you haven't had time to do lately. Because when we have our phones, when we have all this noise around us, all of our perspective is kind of blocked. All of those signals are just are really are blocked. So you need to put those things away and really be with yourself, time to yourself. It's really important. So what do children need? Now we're moving a little bit on to them, but I will keep coming back to you guys looking after yourself first. But children need a lot of things in order for them to feel emotionally safe and secure. But the first thing is they need to feel seen. Sometimes we're so busy running and we're so future orientated that we don't really spend the time to listen and be with our kids. And they need to feel that you are willing to go into their world. And I want you guys to think about when you were a child, the things that were so meaningful and important to you are probably not meaningful or important to you anymore. And sometimes as adults, we tend to kind of dismiss the kids and say, that's not really important, or just go back to what we're doing. But they need you to feel like you are in their world. And I always talk about playful parenting. How can you be a playful parent? You need to get down into their world. You need to have their excitement. You need to be curious and find out what their thoughts are, what are their ideas. And that way you can shape their learning. Because always remember that your child's primary occupation is to play. So everything that they do and the learning that they will have is through that play. So listen to them, validate them. When they say something, say it back to them. I hear you, you're feeling sad. And those are really, really important things. And look at them, because sometimes we're so busy that we're just agreeing, but we're not really listening. Second thing is physically safe. Kids, of course, especially during this pandemic, they want to feel physically safe. So be mindful of what your home environment looks like. Are there barriers? Do you guys have quite deep conversations or maybe scary conversations about COVID in front of those, or about restrictions or masks or numbers? Because as I said before, kids pick up on the fragmented information, put it all together, and ta-da, they have their own story that might actually be quite scary for them. So make sure that that environment at home is safe, and make sure that they feel soothed. And this goes back to those self-regulation skills. Your child will need to learn, and you will have to teach them how they can self-regulate and how they can self-soothe. What strategies can they use when they're feeling certain ways? Being psychologically secure is a big thing as well. So your kids need to know that you are always there, that no matter what, that unconditional presence that you have will always be there for them. So maybe in the middle of a tantrum, you're not there for them. Maybe you're not reinforcing that behavior. Maybe you're ignoring that behavior. But when they are ready to talk and reflect and maybe apologize or talk about things, you need to be ready and provide an environment where your kids feel warm, they're not scared, and they feel open to talking about things. Because sometimes how parents react, and think about you, I know with me, there were some topics that I never wanted to speak to my parents about because I seen how they reacted to them the first time. So I would rather go to my friends or a different adult sometimes. And your kids, you want them to be comfortable going to you. So whatever it is they want to talk about, go with open arms and listen and probe and be curious, be detectives and ask questions to see how much they actually know, and let them feel heard before you can start to work on adapting that or modifying that learning. Expectations are so important here as well. You know, we do need to shift our expectations, you know, and we've had to do that when schools were temporarily closed prior to the summer and during the summer. But you need to think about, what are your expectations? And maybe they do have to change. Maybe there has to be a shift in them, especially with home learning and blended learning and even school-based learning. We need to look at our family values and expectations and see, do they need to be modified a little bit? So give essential tasks priority. So you might need to sit down with your partner or by yourself and say, what are our priorities? Because we're not getting everything done and I'm feeling stressed. The kids are feeding off my stress. So what actually needs to be done today, and what are we going to have to put on the sideline or in the back seat? What can you do today? What can wait? What is the smallest step that you can take today? Often when we wake up, and especially with older kids and teens, and they open up their schedule or their homework and they're like, nah, can't do this. This is way too much. You need to encourage them to use those executive functioning skills to plan, to break down those activities and think, what is the smallest thing that I can start with? Because the minute we do one thing and we check that box, we are more motivated to move on to the next thing and the next thing. So always think about the smallest thing that you can do. Stop comparing yourself to other people. We all tend to do this a lot, but remember, what's possible for your family might be completely impossible for your neighbor or another family. So be mindful yourself when you're talking to other parents about how much you're getting done, what you're doing. And also you, if you're hearing that and you're feeling that pressure, remind yourself that you are completely different and your family values and expectations might be very different, but we really need to avoid those comparisons. So I want to get into now setting up for success. And what I mean here is really getting that consistent, that healthy environment ready for your child to have optimal learning in. And this slide really summarizes the general key points, and then I'm going to go into some of the specifics, okay? So create a white space. Now, for those of you who have never heard of a white space, if you think of a book, all of those white spaces in a book, okay, all of that space, whether it's the margins, the chapters, the blank pages, we don't really notice those things. But imagine if I took them all out of the book, you'd probably feel a little bit overwhelmed, too much information, just running, you know, and nobody really wants to be like that. So I would really advise that you spend maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours a week. Now you might have to schedule this in advance because that's a long time, where you sit with your family or sit with your kids and plan white spaces throughout the week. So plan time away from social media, away from iPads, phones, and just do things that are regular, everyday things that you can kind of, you know, get through and reflect on and do as a family. So whether it be a family board game night or cooking dinner together or doing chores or doing volunteering, have those things in your child's schedule because they're so important. And sometimes I know I will talk about screen time in some time, but you know, we need to, those things won't happen unless we plan ahead and put them in the schedule. So it's too hard for your kid if you say, okay, no screen times today, give me the iPads, whatever it is, because that's very unexpected. And you're going to probably see that version of your kid that you don't want to see, especially on a Thursday evening. So really be mindful about setting time to plan and plan with your kids, because I promise you, if you set a schedule and a routine with them, they are going to feel way more in control. They're going to feel like they're an active participant, and they are going to be more inclined to want to engage in those things if they feel like they've created it with you. Teach leadership through reading. So we can't really emphasize the importance of reading. And as they say, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So reading is really, really important. And I would advise, no matter what age your child is, whether you're reading to them or whether they're reading themselves, build this into the family routine. Have book reviews, ask questions, have challenges. You can make this in parallel with a reward system if you want, but reading really is key. And explore values through dilemmas. So here we really want to, and I spoke about growing through this opportunity at the start, but it's really important that we look at our family values. What are your family values? And see, what are your kids aware of them, and how can you teach them these skills? So giving them different dilemmas, like for example, there's an argument at home. So you can talk about how that argument went, how that person reacted, what they would have done. What did they think? Was it a good idea? Was it a not very good idea? How could we do it differently? Giving them different scenarios, you know, things like, I found 100 dirhams on the ground in Spinneys today, and I took it home with me. I put it in the car. Do you think that was a good idea? What should I have done? How do you think the other person may have felt? Having these probing questions to get your kids thinking is so, so important, because you need to challenge them on these, and you need to see what do they know and how am I going to work on this, so that they can actually grow into our family values. So now I want to get into some of the specific tips that we're going to be talking on. And a lot of these are applied to adults as well, so not just for kids. You might find yourself taking, you know, a few of these on board too. But starting the day right is so important. And I always talk about a book called Secrets of Perfect Timing. I cannot recall the author, but this book talks about how our energy and motivation levels peak and valley throughout the day. And what happens is when we wake up in the morning, okay, we're kind of at a flat level, but as the morning hours come in, our energy and motivation shoots up. It goes like this, way up. And then when it hits lunchtime, it drops back down, lower than it was in the morning. So what I would really advise you to do is all of those non-preferred things, maybe the subjects that are not their favorite, those things should be done early in the morning, and same for us as adults with work, because that's when our energy and motivation is most high. When we think about getting up in the morning, now I know different schools have different policies, but I would always, if you're doing full-time home learning or even part-time, dressing for the occasion is very important. So whether it's, I know a lot of parents even doing full-time home learning who are asking their kids to get into their uniform. And there's a lot of studies around this. It's called in-clothed cognition. So when we dress in a certain way, so for example, if I got up this morning and I wore my pajamas to this webinar, my brain will not respond, and I will not be as motivated and productive as I was as if I'm wearing my work clothes, because your brain gets tricked into a different state, maybe a more relaxed state, a slower state, a less responsive state. So be mindful of getting dressed for the occasion. Healthy breakfast, of course, that's a given. And remind yourself, what are the expectations of today? What is possible? What did I not do? And lift the guilt. If you don't meet everything on that to-do list or on the school schedule, that's okay. You know, that's okay. Forgive yourself and move on. Tomorrow is a new day. But starting the day off correctly on a good positive note is really important. Setting the scene up, and this is where we talk about what does it actually look like, how can we prepare ourselves. And something I want to talk about is heavy work. Now, as an occupational therapist, I love talking about heavy work, because how I'll describe it for an adult is that for those of you who go to the gym, or you have maybe some manual jobs, you lift things, you push things, you pull things, when we engage our muscles, so heavy work preceptors, they're called proprioceptors, and proprioception preceptors are located in the deep muscles, okay? So when we lift something heavy, when we pull something, they're triggered and they are relaxing. They release chemicals that relax our body. So if you're thinking about your child sitting down at a table and you ask them to spin 20 times before they sit down, they're going to be a little bit wired, and they're going to be very alert, and maybe too alert for learning. But if you give them more regulating heavy work, they're going to be more relaxed and settled. And I would say this throughout the day when you feel, and heavy work can also be used to wake kids up too, but you'll have to do it and see with your child what works for them. But examples of heavy work at home or at school, Could be things like pushing, pulling activities, pushing boxes, tug of war, lifting heavy objects, rearranging the furniture around the kitchen table or the school table, wiping a whiteboard, up and down the stairs, carrying the laundry, watering the plants, anything that involves muscle work. All right. Familiarize yourself with the tasks, seek their input. As I said before, if they feel involved in this process, they will be much more likely to engage in it. Go back to the schedule and break tasks up. We call it activity analysis. As I mentioned before, for the older kids, sometimes tasks are too big for your child. So even if teacher gives a certain task, if you feel that your child doesn't understand it, you will have to break down that task into more manageable parts, maybe steps. And I promise you, once they do the first part and they are successful in it, and you might have to really help them be successful in that first part, but once you do, they will be more inclined to continue and keep going with the other steps. So break down the steps into small, manageable parts. I always like to say, have a just right challenge for your kids. So the task cannot be so challenging that they give up immediately and they don't even want to look at it, or it can't be too easy that they're feeling like it's just no challenge. It has to be a little bit of challenge, but enough for them to be successful. So you might have to grade it up or grade it down according to that. Physical space. I know these things are very obvious, but be mindful of them because they will change your whole day. Think about, where is your child currently working from? I have some parents who have actually moved the desks into the hallways if they have space, because sometimes, now it might work well for your child, every child is different, but sometimes when kids are in their rooms, they might feel like, you know, bedroom is more for play and relaxed time, so that might take them a while to wake up. If you have room in the hall or a different area where you can keep an eye on them, it might be beneficial, or it might be at least worth a trial. Make sure they're comfortable, suitable seating, water, and good lighting. For seating, I want you to be detectives. Watch how your child is sitting. Are they fidgety? Are they one of those kids that is always moving, rocking, falling off the chair? Because then we need to be mindful of their sitting tolerance. And how long are you expecting them to sit in a chair? Can they do some work standing up? Can they do, I have some of the kids that I work with, I will have them high kneeling with one hand against the paper on the wall and the other hand writing, standing up. You can get, you know, them therapy balls that you see in the gym, the big rubber balls. You can get ones for kids that are a little bit smaller that will provide constant movement for little movement breaks, or even just for sitting, but lots of different options there. Also be mindful of the temperature. So we know that now families tend to argue sometimes on what kind of temperature it should be, we should set. You know, some people are they like it very cold and warm, but as a general rule of thumb, when we're in office, or when think about it even in a hospital, because doctors need to really stay alert, you'll always find that it's quite low, the temperature. So whatever your family can tolerate, when it's schoolwork, have it as low as your family can tolerate, because we are more alert and engaged when it's a bit chillier when compared to when it's a little bit hotter. And they always say when we're more creative and artistic when the heat is up a little bit. So be mindful of that as well with your child when you're working from home. Of course, gather your resources before. You probably, you know, many of you, especially with teens, might get me when I say that, you know, the night before often all the assignments come out, or then your son or your daughter might realize, oh, I need resources for this. So having the schedule in place is so important, and gathering those resources before. Of course, make it distraction free, whatever rules you have in your house. Remove devices, TV, music. If the house is too loud, you can get them earphones. There are noise cancelling earphones that you can get that some, mainly tweens and teens, I find quite useful if they're feeling a little bit distracted from other noises in the house or siblings. And just be mindful of where their space is. If you're not sure how your child is working, sit beside them for the day or for a few hours and watch what's distracting them. Are they cold? Are they moving? Are they looking out the window? Is there a phone buzzing that's annoying them? But you'll never know unless you actually be a little bit of a detective. So what are some of the things that you can really work on the moment? And scheduling is something that I know I've mentioned, but I'm going to go back to. So when we have a routine and a schedule in place, kids feel so grounded. if they don't know what they're doing, we're going to see increase in maladaptive behaviors. We're going to see tantrums. We're going to see decreased flexibility because they don't know what to expect. And as I said, their frontal lobe is not fully developed, so they can't problem solve. It's just like when you tell them something and it's boom, volcano, because they don't know how to always process that. So be mindful of that, and creating a schedule and a routine is the first step in that. So keep it very clear and simple and age appropriate. The same routine, whiteboard or whatever you have, maybe you stick it on the fridge, maybe it's online, but whatever you use might be different for your kids, depending what age they are. So make sure it's age appropriate. Make it visible. Have a look at, so let's say when we get up 6 a.m. inner hour. So for adults, this might be that it's just time for them, or whatever amount of time that you have in your household to really gather yourself and to check in with yourself, like we discussed at the start, and see how that's on the top of the schedule, because that's really, really important. Then we have breakfast. The morning hurdle is when we really come together and discuss the day and talk about where we are, how we're feeling. Are we feeling just right? Are we feeling like we're still sleepy? What are the tasks? What's on the cards today? What are our to-do list? What's the priorities? All of those different things are really, really important. Clear breaks and play time. So we always say every 25 minutes, your child should have a brain break. If you've never heard of a brain break, you can use Pinterest or Google brain breaks. They'll give you lots of different ideas. I have some kids that like write them down and put them in a jar and just pick them out every 25 minutes. So this could be like 20 jumping jacks, counting backwards, writing something down, drawing a picture, going on my mini trampoline, whatever you have in your house. But those things are really, really important. And you might feel like, I don't want to disturb my kid because they've been going for 40 minutes now and it's good, but really that will not work long term. You need to even encourage them if they don't look for a break. Every 25 minutes is really, really important, even if it's up and down in the chair, stretching their legs, whatever it is, but you really need to focus on that. Of course, you can make changes to all of these things depending on your child's engagement levels. I will be going through different grades and kind of strategies at each level, but remember that your child might not fit into that one. They might be a little bit above or below you. So change things. It's a constant change as your child grows and maybe gets used to the schedule. You can add to it or decrease it. Another thing that I always encourage parents to do, and this slide all comes back to that self-regulation that I spoke about for parents at the start. Your child needs to understand what their body looks like when it's too low, just right, and too high. So this is an engine analogy, but there's plenty out there. Some teachers use zones of regulation. They use, like, if you ask your kid about them, I'm sure they'll know, like, what does the green zone look like? What does the blue zone look like? And teaching your child what it looks like and which level they're at will help them be able to go up or down a gear. So too low in general might look like they're bored, they're sleepy, they can't concentrate, their head is being held up by their arm, their head is on the table. Just right is optimal listening and learning skills. And too high, a lot of the kids that I work with tell me, Anna, I'm too high all the time. I'm Sonic, I'm a Ferrari, I'm running, I'm speeding all the time. And sometimes when we're speeding all the time, unfortunately, we might get in trouble, or we might have too many behaviors that are too fast, or we might even get a little bit angry or frustrated. But teaching your kid what that looks like will help you teach them the strategies to cool it down, or to engage in alerting activities to notch it up a bit. I run a webinar called How to Parent High Energy Kids, and I talk a lot about this. So here's some useful tips. I'll fly through this, I'm conscious of the time. So use a calendar with codes, 15 to 20 minute blocks. Break tasks down into small things. Use accessibility features. So YouTube, all of these online things now are very accessible, especially if your son or daughter has any kind of learning difficulties. They can get text, they can get it read aloud. There's lots of different things. Always reach out to teacher if you're not sure, and remove any barriers that your child might have. So this might be you sitting down and analyzing that task with them and seeing what's too much or what's too little, but that's really, really essential. So now I kind of want to go into some of the grade specific strategies. And again, as I said, this may or may not suit your child and your home learning. So when we talk about, the KG to grade 2, this is when your child will probably need your support the most, because they don't have the attention to do a lot of those things by themselves. So this is also where they're learning those essential academic foundations of maths, writing, reading. So you are going to be most involved. Select activities that they can choose from. Remember, choice is everything. So you might give them 5 things and they create the order of them, but them feeling in control will get you through the task. Mix between seated and movement breaks. And I guess with this age, I want you to remember that it's not all about paper and pencil and sitting down, because your child learns through moving and play. And if you ever go into a KG or even a grade 1 or 2 class, there's so much play involved. So be mindful of how you can teach them through play. And I've lots of ideas for that. I won't get into it now, but if anyone has questions, please get back to me at the end. We would recommend 9:30 to 2 as the most suitable time. Most kids will have optimal attention and motivation at this time. Again, it could differ from family to family, but throughout the ages, this is the time that I'm going to refer to. If they're pushing back from this, remember at this age, it's key to validate how they're feeling. Sometimes we don't need to have the answers, and remember, sometimes we'll tell them, you don't need to be worried, or it's okay, but that's not validating. That's telling them, I'm not really listening to you right now. So if you don't know what to say and your child is telling you they're sad because there's no school today, or they're sad because they miss their friends, sometimes it's enough to say, I hear you that you're sad. That must be really, really hard for you, because then they will feel heard and seen, like we spoke about at the start. All right, listen to what they have to say and focus on the positive. At this age, positive reinforcement is everything. So whatever they are doing that's positive, even if it's sitting down nicely for 10 seconds, that's when you need to praise them. Always remember that whatever we give attention to as parents will increase. So if you are only giving your child praise when they do something, or giving them attention, I should say, when they're doing something wrong, like, why did you get up out of your chair? If you are only saying that, they will keep doing that because you are giving them attention. Even though it's negative attention, it will increase. So whatever we give attention to will increase. So give attention to the positive things and not to the other things. And try and be as creative as possible. As I said, learning through play. This might even be things like putting chores into their schedule, because chores are really important for kids this age, but all kids, but especially this age, because you are going to teach them problem solving, planning, organization skills, and those are things that they would be learning if they're in school through their peers and teachers and different experiences that they mightn't always typically have access to at home. So the next, we have 3 to 6. So this is really when your child is exploring and thinking about the world in more abstract ways. You could say they're kind of reading between the lines. They need your help, but they don't need as much of your help. They're trying to be a little bit more independent. So we would usually say have 4 periods each day and include other activities. Now, of course, this will depend on your school or the program you're following. Sometimes schools will have set periods, but sometimes you might have the flexibility as a parent to create your own. But we would say roughly 4 is the most that they can manage. Again, the time is the same. A lot of the pushback techniques, how you can respond to them if they're showing some signs of not engaging, are similar. So validate them and increase tolerance, listen to what they have to say, and again, really, really focus on the positive. The more positive reinforcement and attention you give them, the more likely they are to do those things again. Moving on to grade 7 to 9. So this is really when we're hitting adolescence. And I think it's so important here to remember that there's lots of different physical and psychological changes happening. So we really need to be mindful of those. Your child is probably forming their own values and self-identity within school. They're establishing emotional independence away from you, and they're building quite mature relationships with their friends. There's lots of different things going on. But still, they might need your help. Of course they do, because their frontal lobe, those executive functioning skills, are still not there. So they might know them, but they might not actually know how to act. So you might feel that they have the knowledge, but you need to encourage them in how to actually act and generalize those skills. Now, we say for teens that they should have between 8 to 10 hours of sleep a day, but realistically, most of them are getting 7 and under. So really be mindful of that and how you can change it. You can offer them maybe early afternoon naps, but keep these short, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, no longer. Again, because sleep really does matter, but we don't want to make them more tired than they were before. Use of timetables and stopwatches are really important. Realign your expectations with them if they push back. Outline the consequences in advance. You need to be really clear with your parenting here. What are the consequences of not getting work done, of not reaching certain goals? How can they recoup on that, and how can they make up for it? There has to be some kind of very clear patterns. And again, you'll see it embedded throughout. Focus on the consequences. Focus on the positives, I should say. So now we're moving on to the last one, grade 10 to 12. So really here, they're becoming very independent thinkers. And what they're doing is they're using all of that knowledge that you guys as parents have taught them and teachers in the classroom, and they are generalizing that knowledge into different parts of their life. But again, they need the support with the emotional regulation and executive functioning skills. You might be that person who needs to get them to actually complete that visual timetable, the schedule, the routine, to put things in color codes, to put things in red, to check when assessments are due. They need your frontal lobe for that, because they're older, but it's still not fully there. So don't expect them to do it themselves. You really need to be there at the start, get them into the routine, and then let them take the wheel when they're ready. Make sure that they have they're motivated to get in contact with their teachers. You know, teachers are really your best friend at this stage, because they can really support teens, you know, really get motivated and give them extra work and resources and whatever they want and they need. So keeping that close relationship with teachers is so important. Setting boundaries and really taking their concerns seriously. And when it comes to mental health, what I would always recommend parents is when it comes to teens, you know, teens don't really like to sit down and talk and have that, you know, quiet time. So maybe you have to go in to their world, play a game of basketball or football with them, or do something that they enjoy doing to have these conversations. All right. So we're almost done. I want to leave some time for questions. I know I'm a little bit over time, so I will fly through these. In terms of screen time, something that a lot of parents have asked me lately, you know, how much is too much? There's no answer to this. This completely depends on your family. But some points to remember: contact teacher, ask her what we can be using on screens on the iPad, what apps would they recommend, what are educational tools, how can we use social media for good, how can we learn from it, how can we get our kids and prompt them to be more creative online, how can they connect with friends? Connections are so important. Is it a safe connection? But I would say when it comes to screen time, before you jump into becoming overwhelmed and very worried about the amount of time that your kid is spending, the most important concern you should have is, what is the content that they are watching? You should know this, and you might need to sit with them and have very clear rules and expectations, because the content is everything. And also watch how your kids are as they play or as they use different apps or whatever it is, because their mood and how they're using the app will show you what kind of an effect it's going to have on them after. If it's quite an aggressive, loud, fast-paced thing, it might affect negatively their behaviors, but other things like connecting with friends and kind of more positive things might be quite good for their mood. So be mindful of that. Use media together. You know, I have a lot of boys that I work with that play the PlayStation, and the parents kind of, you know, they say that he doesn't want to do anything but play the PlayStation, or she. But I sometimes say to parents, have you ever played with them? You know, maybe you should play with them. Maybe you should get into their world and understand and use that as a bonding experience. Because sometimes we need to use anything that our kids can give us to connect with them. And again, just really, really set limits with screens. But if anyone has questions about screens, I will ask them. And last but not least, what are some of the things you can do at home? Be creative with this if you are not leaving the house right now. Can you make a water park in the garden? Can you have a beach day? I've had families camping outside. Okay, I don't know where you are, but it might be a little bit hot, but maybe it's something you can try for a few hours. You can have a family picnic. I have done team nights where, you know, we've had different themes every week, whether it's a Mexican cooking night or we decorate the house or whatever it is. But these things instill a bit of creativity, surprise, and fun for kids that they need. Because think about it, a lot of them don't have anything to look forward to. Kids usually, you know, get through school because they know something fun is going to happen at the weekend. So if they don't have those same fun opportunities at the weekend, you might see that their motivation might dip a little bit during the week. Think about things that you can do at home, board games, cooking challenges, dance parties. Try and bring in physical activity here as much as you can. And I will finish by saying the power of being bored. A lot of parents say to me, I don't want my kids to be bored. And I'm telling you now that it's okay for your kids to be bored. Do you remember on the first slides, I talked to you about the importance of solitude. And it's really important that your kids have time, the white space, even if they're bored, because when we're bored, we're more creative. Boredom will give your kids time to think about the thoughts, to organize things, to gain opinions and perspective. So don't worry, let your kids be bored, okay? It might sound a little bit strange, but boredom is what will spark some of those creative things in ourselves as adults and also in the kids. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I can see I have lots of questions already. So for those of you that have to go, please feel free to leave. I did go a little bit over time, but that's okay. I'm going to stay here for a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. For those of you who have to leave, thank you so much for being with me today. I really hope that you gained something from today and that you can walk away with a few tips for your toolbox. Again, Dr. Catherine was meant to be joining today. She had to step out. So for those of you who are expecting to see her, I hope I fulfilled that role okay for you. And hopefully I'll get to meet some of you in person again. I have lots of people saying thank you. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. You are most welcome. For those of you saying thank you anytime, I'm really happy to be here with you. Okay, let me get to some questions. Okay, the school e-learning program is structured in the exact same way as an in-person learning. This means that they have 8 lessons in the day, 55-minute lessons. They have to hurry from one Zoom session to another. How do we balance our child's well-being with the school expectations? My child needs frequent movement breaks. Being set for 8 sessions is not feasible. I completely agree with you. So what I would do in this case is, firstly, see what you can do from a bigger point of view. Can you speak to teacher? Can they slow it down a bit? Can we have a 5 minutes brain break in between each lesson, or 10 minutes? And if not, then we need to, if they say no, which they might, maybe there's a structure or a policy put in place, but how can your child still engage in those things while they're sitting in their chair? So there's lots of movement things they can do. Maybe you have to ask teacher permission if they're on the screen. Can they do something standing up? Can they have a wobble cushion? Can they have a different kind of chair that maybe spins or moves a little bit, so they're constantly getting that little sense of movement, standing up, sitting down? And even if it's a 20-second break in between switching Zoom sessions, getting up, splashing water on their face, having a snack, doing jumping jacks, doing these things are really, really important in intense bursts. Even though you might not have 10 minutes to do them, but you still should have a few minutes, even seconds, to get that in. Having fidgets available for them on their desk, things that they can move and they can play with, are really important to keep them busy, keep them occupied. There's lots of ideas for fidgets online that are not very distractive as well. But I would say be mindful of what you do after school, if that's the case. So maybe at the lunch break or whatever it is, you would be careful that there's no screens during that time. That, you know, when your kid says, I need a break, I've been in e-learning, that yeah, they do need a break, but it should not be in front of any kind of screen. They need something else, a movement or a snack break. Really, really important. Hope that answers your question. Next one is, what screen time limits? When it comes to timing for screen time, there's no right answer. To be completely honest with you, someone asked me about, you know, what is the right amount of time? And there's no answer for that, because that will completely depend on your family, and different family have screen time rules. But I would say, as a general rule of thumb, I would say to not have, because if they're doing online learning or they're using screens during the day, it's really important that when they are on breaks from school, that they're not using screens. So screens can be in the evening, not too close to bedtime, of course. We say maybe an hour or 2 hours before bed, there shouldn't be. But make sure that the other things are always put in front of the screen time. So have a checklist. Has my child done their exercise today? Has my child connected with me and their siblings today? Have we had dinner together today? And once you've clicked all of those things and they have got their dose of those other things, maybe then you can look at screen time. Okay? Some people saying, thank you, you're most welcome. I'm so happy that you enjoyed. Someone said they feel very supported now. Thank you. Please feel free to check out some of our other webinars. I would love to speak with you guys again. The school is giving a lot of homework. How do I get my son to finish it? Oh, that's a tough one. So what I would say is, do you feel, think about this here, do you feel that your son is able to do the homework and he's not motivated, or it's genuinely just too much for him? In that case, I would go back to school and explain to them, look, I need to realign my expectations, and maybe you do as well, because we cannot get this done. And the mental health side effects of that and the emotional outbursts or whatever I'm seeing at home is really difficult. And that's my priority. My priority right now is his emotional health. So what are the things on this list? And maybe you can have that check-in with teacher every week. What are the essential things that he needs to do, and what are the extra? Because you have to remember that teachers are trying to cover a broad spectrum of abilities. They're trying to make sure that the fast learners are challenged and occupied. So maybe if your son is finding it a little bit difficult, you need to realign those with teacher. That would be my best advice. And then I would say break it down into very small parts. I don't know what age your son is, but I like with kids, young kids, I might use visual schedules. With a lot of the kids that I work with in sessions, when I know I have a lot of work to do with them, I will do a checklist, and I will do, 5 things that I want to do, and each time we're finished, they check it off. And that sense of checking it off is quite is nice for them, because they feel like they're getting somewhere. If you have the option and it's flexible, I would always say a first then schedule for younger kids. So first you have to do your writing or your drawing shapes, whatever age they are. Then you can play with your Lego for 5 minutes and set the timer, and always have that alternation of first non-preferred task, then preferred task, because that way they'll get through the non-preferred. Whereas if you say to your child, sure, you can play with the Lego, and then we're going to start maths, they're never going to want to finish the Lego, because why would they, And be mindful of how you approach that schedule. How would I know if my child has ADHD or just tired or not enjoying whatever he's doing? I guess I really rely on teachers for this sometimes, because teachers are very good, and schools, all schools have SEN and support teams included, inclusion teams. So usually if they feel that a child is struggling, or they might have an underlying diagnosis or underlying difficulties, they will actually raise it and flag it with parents. So I would check in with the school and say, like, was he doing this in school? This is something that I'm really observing at home, and I'm concerned. And try the strategies, try different alerting strategies or calm down strategies, routine management. Because remember, I don't know whether your child is in school or home learning or blended, but this adaptation is going to take time. It's just like if you have a physical injury, they always say that the adjustment period for change is between 6 to 8 weeks. But the same applies to mental health and to change, like going back to school. So sometimes it takes kids longer to actually get into the routine and for you to see their motivation. So give it some time. But again, if you're feeling that, this is something that's ongoing, I would definitely check in with a psychologist. You can definitely come to us and chat us and see, do you feel like there's concerns there that we need to explore? But I would try some of your strategies and speak to the school first. Another one, I am a father of a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. I'd like to get in contact with me for a one-on-one session. Okay, absolutely no problem. So my name is Anna. I'm the occupational therapist here. You shouldn't get lost when you try to find me because I'm the only one here. So please feel free to reach us at the Lighthouse Arabia, and we'll be happy to support you if you need any support with parenting or your kids. Thank you so much. What are fidgets? Oh, okay. So fidgets are, if you ask your child what a fidget is, and thank you guys for staying on. I know we're over time, but we're fine. Today, I don't have clients today, so I'm happy to stay with you. So fidgets are, you know, those spinners or things like with marbles in them or sticky things or strings that you pull. Fidgets usually keep our hands busy, and kids will go through stages of having different things. It could be like a therapy putty. It could be things that you click into place. Any of these little things. If you Google fidgets, you'll find lots. Now, I would be mindful of distracted. Sometimes I work with kids who cannot keep their hands still and are always looking for things to hold and grab. So I will get them a fidget depending on their preference, of course, but something that's not distracting. And always have rules. Now, this is just my advice, but I would always have rules with fidgets, because if we don't have rules, they can be more distracting than your child was before. So it might be that they're allowed to play and hold this toy under the table, but they have to show good eye contact to teacher on the screen. Because if you see that they're messing with it or they're dropping it, then it's not going to work. So have some rules in place. Some of you guys saying, thank you, you're most welcome. The book I recommend is Secrets of Perfect Timing. It's an adult book. It's for understanding time management and how to be more productive. And the other book I mentioned by the parenting book is called Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel. I have a lot of other questions, but I'm going to answer one last one, and I really do apologize if I didn't get to your question. Please feel free to reach out to me and I will get to it. How do you deal with kids who are advanced in some subjects in grade 2 or 3, but they're developed for their age groups? But are developed for their age groups. Okay, so a kid who is more advanced and maybe is running ahead a little bit, I would say your teacher is going to be your guidance here, because your teacher will actually be able to give you extra work. You need to explain to teacher that we're finishing this too fast. It's not challenging enough for him. How do we do more? If your teacher doesn't give you the extra material, there are lots of websites that you can research and teacher might be able to refer you to that are for, say, gifted children in certain ages. And they will give your child a really advanced look at things and dive into things, because again, your child needs to be at the just right level that I mentioned before. It's not too easy, it's not too difficult, it's a challenge, but it's a right challenge. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to leave now. If I didn't answer your question, I do apologize. It was a pleasure being with you here today. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope that you enjoyed. Wishing you a fabulous weekend ahead. Thankfully, it's Thursday. We're almost there. It's almost school pickup or our e-learning finishing time. So I really wish you a lovely weekend, and hopefully I'll get to meet you guys in person soon. All right, thank you.